Welcome to SRBC 2022 conference hosted by CCMB in collaboration with University of Hyderabad. Today we have with us Dr. Giriraj Chandak. He's a chief scientist in CCMB. He works on complex disorders such as type 2 diabetes mellitus, chronic pancreatitis, and today he will be talking to us about how diabetes influences our life and how our lifestyle influences our diabetes. And today he will be showing us insights and how we can better adapt our lifestyle to get a better well-being as an individual. So welcome Dr. Giriraj Chandak.
Thank you.
We are really happy to have you here. So would you like to tell us that your lab works on a disorder called as thin fat Indian phenotype. So what is this phenotype and how does it look like and what implications does it have?
So thin fat phenotype is actually a description for the Indians, and this was given by Dr. Yagnik, one of my close collaborators. What essentially it means is that the Indians have less of muscle mass and more of fat mass, and that is again concentrated around the paunch. So and this fat around the paunch is known to be metabolically active, and this is known as central obesity. So there is a strong association of central obesity with insulin resistance, obesity, all that, which are the forerunners for future development of diabetes mellitus. So our interest has been to understand that how this particular phenotype makes us susceptible to development of diabetes, and that's what we have been trying to understand, both from genetic point of view as well as from environmental point of view.
Okay. This is really nice. I mean, we all can identify this phenotype running around us in the market and people around us. So how does genetics influence this phenotype?
So diabetes is a complex disease, as many other diseases are, and because this disease runs in families, you will find more number of individuals in a family. You will find that in twins also, monozygotic twins have higher prevalence. So it is considered to be a familial disease, and genetics is one of the major reason for that. So currently, with all the technologies and data that is available, it is understood that about 40% of genetic heritability of diabetes is understood. And it is also very clear that it is not completely a genetic disorder. So if it was a genetic disorder completely, then you would have identified one or few or hundreds of genes which will explain each and every case. But that is not so. Like I can give an example of, say, beta thalassemia. Every case of beta thalassemia will have a defect in beta globin gene. That means that it is perfectly Mendelian genetic disorder.
So in India, being a tropical country, the kind of climate we have and the kind of diet we all have, more rice eating population. So do you think nutrition and environment play a major role in developing these disorders in Indian population?
Yeah, I mean that's a very tricky question, because everybody all over the world, the concept is that if you have high energy rich foods, then you are likely to become obese, and then the future consequences will follow. Okay, but as I mentioned at the beginning, that Indians don't have that kind of generalized obesity. They have more obesity around the paunch actually, and I mean that is one of the reasons why Indians are insulin resistant, and they develop this diabetes. So this is something which is at a macronutrient level, which means we talk about carbohydrates, proteins, fats and other things. What we interestingly find that it's the the micronutrients, or those whose requirements are not that high on a day-to-day basis, they are the ones which are likely influencing rather creating a conducive environment so that type 2 diabetes or these other diseases can develop. I'm not ruling out the role of high energy foods and all that, but those are very well established and they are suggested to have their own individual role. But when it comes to the micronutrients, then there are various, genetic and other mechanisms which can influence the disease causation.
This is really nice, and it really helps to understand how nutrition can design our lifestyle and our well-being. So, speaking of diabetes, does it also influences other disorders such as cardiovascular disorder, thyroid, or any other disorders prevailing?
Yeah, I mean this is pretty complex actually, because when we talk about diabetes, it is no clear-cut diagnosis. It's like you have a high glucose levels and that's why people are diabetic. But then there are so many types of diabetes, each of which have their own characteristic features. So so when you talk about this particular type of diabetes, you need to differentiate them into individual levels. And say for example, diabetes has insulin resistance or obesity as the major features, but other types of diabetes, they may not have these features also. So what we currently try to understand is that what defines the diabetes, which means, is it only obesity or obesity with insulin resistance, or none of these but something else is there. So we consider this as a syndrome, each of which a syndrome or an amalgamation of these traits, each of which have their own influence on the disease risk. Interestingly, like say for example obesity, that is not only a risk factor for diabetes, but it is also a risk factor for high blood pressure, risk factor for cardiovascular problem, and also risk factor for breast cancer and others. So that is why it is very important to understand these intermediate traits rather than looking straight away at diabetes per se. So in a one line answer to your question after this detailed explanation is that yes, diabetes or the people with diabetes are at a higher risk of developing cardiovascular or other metabolic disorders also.
That's really good. So do you have a message for adult or mid-30s, mid-40s people to keep a check on their diet, or so that they can evade these disorders or get an early prognosis of
Right. I have a little, not a message or a different kind of message. So you started with thrifty, thin fat phenotype. What our research along with our collaborators have found that this risk of diabetes is established very early in life. Even as early as at the time of birth itself, the Indian babies are more insulin resistant and have more of fat mass and less of muscle mass, which is in contrast to what we see in the European. So currently what our research shows that the early life exposure or early life phenotype, that has an important implication on future risk of these diseases. And this is related to the maternal nutrition also. We all know that if mother eat properly, then only the child is fit and all that. But what we are talking about is not only the macronutrient like carbohydrate and others, but we are also talking about a balanced diet, which includes micronutrients like B12, folate, many other micronutrients also. And further, this is said to be important even for the health of the mother during her own pregnancy itself. So the message that I would like to give is that be preventive, in the sense that be careful with your diet. Particularly for the females, I would say that they should be extremely careful with their diet. They should have balanced diet and not ignore even these micronutrients like B12, folate and other things. And they should be particularly careful around the time of pregnancy, because if there is anything wrong during pregnancy, particularly this nutrition, that is not only going to impact the lady but also going to impact the future generation as well. So in simple terms, it's better to be prepared than to get into the consequences and handle them at a later stage or so.
These are really important health advisory for not only the mother but for the future generation. and I'm really sure that it helps us all to follow and take care of ourselves, our family, and our related individuals. So thank you so much, Chandak.
Thank you very much.
And thank you so much for listening. We really will coming up with more interviews in this conference. So check out them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.